The month was June 1943. Deep in the heart of Texas, Camp Hearn prepared for an arrival that would shake the foundations of everything these men believed about America. A locomotive whistle pierced the humid air. Steam hissed from the brakes. Metal wheels screeched against steel rails. The first trainload of German prisoners was about to step onto American soil. These weren't ordinary soldiers. These were hardened veterans, men who had served under the legendary Erwin Rommel in the scorching deserts of North Africa. They had witnessed the collapse of the Afrika Korps. They had seen the final surrender in Tunisia. Over 250,000 German and Italian troops had laid down their weapons on that fateful day of May 13, 1943. What awaited them in America would demolish every lie Nazi propaganda had fed them. Every assumption about American weakness would crumble. Every belief about their enemy's capabilities would be proven false. The war had created an unexpected opportunity for observation. Secretary of War Henry L. Stimson had established something called the United States Strategic Bombing Survey. President Franklin D. Roosevelt had ordered it on November 3, 1944. Its mission was clear: document the physical destruction Allied bombs inflicted on Germany. But another survey was happening simultaneously. An unintended study was taking place in the minds of prisoners. Over 371,000 German soldiers would witness firsthand what made Allied victory not just possible, but inevitable. Their journey to enlightenment had begun in the dusty ports of North Africa. Processing centers in Oran buzzed with activity. Casablanca's facilities hummed with efficiency. American military organization operated like a well-oiled machine. Thousands of prisoners moved through the system daily. Medical examinations proceeded with methodical precision. Identity papers were processed without delay. Geneva Convention briefings were delivered systematically. Everything moved with clockwork efficiency that exceeded anything these veterans had witnessed, even during Germany's most successful campaigns. The food hit them like a physical blow. After months of desert warfare on starvation rations, abundance appeared on their plates. White bread materialized at every meal. Real coffee steamed in their cups. Fresh meat appeared twice daily without fail. This wasn't propaganda. This wasn't special treatment designed to impress them. This was simply standard American military fare. The casual abundance was staggering. The ships that carried them across the Atlantic told their own story of American industrial might. Liberty ships filled the harbors. These vessels were mass-produced at rates that defied German understanding of shipbuilding. The famous case of the SS Robert E. Peary had become legend. Built in 4 days and 15 hours. That was a publicity stunt, they learned later. Extensive prefabrication had made it possible. But even the normal production time of 39 to 42 days in 1943 and 1944 represented remarkable efficiency. German shipyards needed months to construct similar vessels. The 2-week Atlantic crossing opened their eyes to casual waste that revealed unimaginable abundance. American sailors tossed aside half-eaten meals. Food that exceeded German military rations was discarded without thought. The ships themselves gleamed with modern equipment. Radar systems operated as standard equipment. Navigation instruments that Germany considered experimental were routine fixtures on cargo vessels. The technology gap was becoming apparent. American ports delivered the first crushing blow to their worldview. Norfolk Naval Base sprawled across 4,300 acres. Construction and repair operations proceeded simultaneously on a scale that dwarfed any German naval facility. Dozens of vessels filled the harbor in various stages of completion or repair. Operations that would occupy major German ports for weeks happened here in single days. The capacity was beyond their comprehension. The rail journey inland provided the most systematic destruction of Nazi propaganda they had ever experienced. No cattle cars awaited them. Instead, passenger coaches welcomed them aboard. Actual seats supported their bodies. Dining facilities served meals during the journey. Some cars even provided sleeping berths for longer trips. Through the windows, an electrified nation revealed itself. Every small town blazed with electric lights after sunset. Rural areas that would have been completely dark in Germany glowed with illumination. Farmhouses and barns sparkled with electric power. Factories operated through the night. Parking lots filled with workers' private automobiles stretched as far as they could see. Car ownership in Germany remained a privilege reserved for the elite. Here, ordinary workers drove to their jobs in their own vehicles. The camps themselves shattered every expectation these men had formed about American prisoner facilities. Built with remarkable speed, but constructed to last, these facilities provided conditions superior to what many prisoners had known as German civilians. The United States operated a vast network of detention facilities. Over 500 camps sprawled across 46 states. Only Nevada and North Dakota lacked prisoner installations. The system included 175 main camps, supported by over 325 branch facilities. Camp populations varied dramatically. Some housed as few as 250 prisoners. Others contained up to 12,000 men. Construction timelines were breathtaking. Most camps rose from empty ground to full operation in just 90 days. The barracks impressed them immediately. Electric lights illuminated every room. Indoor plumbing functioned perfectly. Heating systems maintained comfortable temperatures. These weren't temporary shelters. These were substantial structures built to house human beings with dignity. The infrastructure surrounding the camps represented engineering achievements that exceeded many German municipalities. Water treatment plants provided clean drinking water. Electrical generation systems powered the facilities. Sewage systems handled waste with modern efficiency. Camp hospitals amazed the German medical personnel among the prisoners. Equipment surpassed most German civilian medical facilities. Modern X-ray machines operated routinely. Surgical facilities gleamed with the latest instruments. Pharmaceutical supplies flowed without interruption. American medical staff used penicillin as standard treatment. German forces could barely obtain this wonder drug for critical cases. The systematic approach to prisoner health included regular checkups for everyone. Dental care was provided routinely. Chronic conditions received proper treatment. These resources exceeded what Germany provided its own soldiers in the field. The camp kitchens revealed agricultural abundance that bordered on the impossible. Refrigeration units, unknown in most German facilities, preserved fresh meat and vegetables indefinitely. Electric mixers processed ingredients automatically. Automated dishwashers cleaned thousands of plates daily. Gas ranges capable of feeding entire regiments operated continuously without interruption. Daily rations included luxuries German civilians hadn't seen since before the war began. Fresh milk appeared at every meal. Eggs were served regularly. Meat and vegetables arrived in quantities that seemed impossible. Food waste was mandated by regulation. Kitchens prepared 10% extra to ensure adequate portions for everyone. This systematic waste caused genuine psychological distress among men from a nation experiencing severe rationing. Autumn 1943 brought unexpected opportunities. American labor shortages led to prisoner employment programs. Agricultural work and industrial assignments became available. This employment, while economically necessary for America, provided German prisoners with unprecedented exposure to American methods. Midwestern farms opened their eyes to mechanization that revolutionized agricultural understanding. Single farms in Iowa encompassed more land than entire German villages. Nebraska ranches stretched beyond the horizon. Tractors, combines, and specialized machinery allowed individual farmers to cultivate hundreds of acres single-handedly. Hybrid seed corn, developed through American agricultural research, produced yields that doubled traditional varieties. Chemical fertilizers, which Germany desperately needed for explosives production, were applied liberally to enhance crop growth. Rural electrification had transformed American agriculture. Over 90% of American farms enjoyed electric power by 1943. Germany could claim less than 20% rural electrification. The contrast in agricultural productivity was overwhelming. American farms achieved yields that German agriculture struggled to approach even under ideal conditions. Contemporary accounts consistently described American production as substantially exceeding German capabilities. Mechanization allowed one American farmer with proper equipment to accomplish work that required dozens of German agricultural workers using traditional methods. The systematic approach to farming amazed prisoners with technical backgrounds. Soil testing determined optimal crop selection. Crop rotation maintained soil fertility. Scientific breeding programs improved livestock quality. Agriculture had evolved from traditional practice to industrial science. Food processing facilities demonstrated automation that defied German industrial understanding. Canneries in California and New Jersey operated production lines that processed volumes requiring hundreds of workers in Germany. Automated filling machines worked with mechanical precision. Electric conveyor systems moved products continuously. Quality control procedures operated with skeleton crews while American workers served overseas. Yet production exceeded peacetime levels through pure efficiency and mechanization. Industrial centers, though prisoners were prohibited from direct war production work, revealed the periphery of American manufacturing might. The Detroit area alone contained more automotive production capacity than existed in all of Germany combined. Plants that had manufactured civilian automobiles now produced military vehicles at rates German industry never approached. Tanks rolled off assembly lines continuously. Aircraft engines emerged from former car factories. Military vehicles were manufactured at unprecedented speeds. The Willow Run plant, visible to prisoners working in nearby areas, achieved peak production of B-24 bombers at an incredible rate. One complete aircraft every 63 minutes during April 1944. Though this exceptional pace was not sustained throughout the entire war, it demonstrated capabilities that German aircraft manufacturers couldn't achieve even for simple fighter planes. The omnipresence of electricity struck prisoners with almost physical force. American factories consumed electrical power at rates that seemed impossible to sustain. Farms operated electric equipment routinely. Homes blazed with electric lighting throughout the night. A single aluminum plant in Tennessee consumed more electricity than entire German cities. The Tennessee Valley Authority had harnessed rivers for power generation on a scale Germany never attempted. Hoover Dam alone generated more electricity than multiple German power plants operating simultaneously. This electrical abundance enabled continuous industrial production around the clock. Three-shift factory operations never ceased. Civilian lifestyle consumed resources Germany reserved exclusively for military purposes. The treatment of Italian prisoners after Italy's September 1943 surrender provided another psychological shock that reverberated through the German camps. Italian POWs who cooperated with American authorities received enhanced privileges immediately. Better quarters were provided. Paid work became available. Social interaction with American civilians was permitted. German prisoners watched their former allies integrating into American society while they remained confined behind barbed wire. Yet even their confinement conditions exceeded what Germany provided its own forces in the field. Christmas 1943 delivered perhaps the most profound psychological impact these men would experience during their captivity. American religious organizations sent packages to German prisoners. Enemy soldiers whose nation was still actively fighting America received gifts. Churches organized Christmas services conducted in German. Local communities donated special food for holiday meals. This treatment of active enemies revealed not weakness, but supreme confidence in victory. Only a nation absolutely certain of triumph could afford such magnanimity toward defeated foes. Educational opportunities available in the camps exceeded what many prisoners had experienced in Germany as civilians. By early 1944, approximately 25,000 prisoners had completed formal courses. English language instruction was widely available. American history classes were offered regularly. Vocational training programs prepared men for post-war careers. Major American universities provided correspondence courses to interested prisoners. Occasional lecturers visited camps to deliver presentations. The intellectual stimulation was unprecedented. Camp libraries contained thousands of volumes. German language books filled entire sections. Periodicals arrived regularly from both America and neutral countries. Prisoners could read multiple newspapers daily. They experienced press freedom unknown in Nazi Germany, where media served exclusively as state propaganda. The educational program's scope was remarkable by any standard. University professors delivered lectures on democratic governance. Economic systems were explained in detail. Constitutional law was taught to interested students. This intellectual engagement complemented the visceral experience of witnessing American prosperity firsthand. Prisoners didn't merely observe American success. They studied the underlying systems that produced such abundance. Camp newspapers published by prisoners themselves reflected this gradual transformation of thinking. By 1945, prisoners published 135 different newspapers across the camp system. Publications that began with defiant nationalism gradually shifted toward discussions of post-war reconstruction and democratic governance. American authorities permitted remarkable editorial freedom. Prisoners explored political and economic concepts that had been strictly forbidden in Nazi Germany. This intellectual freedom, combined with material abundance, proved more persuasive than any propaganda program could have achieved. One significant publication stood out among all others. Der Ruf, meaning the call, was published at Fort Kearny, Rhode Island. Distribution reached camps nationwide. This newspaper was carefully edited by anti-Nazi prisoners selected through the re-education program. The publication gradually introduced democratic concepts to its readers. Critical thinking about Germany's future was encouraged. The evolution of these publications, from initial defiance to eventual acceptance of democratic principles, provided documented evidence of ideological transformation occurring among the prisoner population. June 6, 1944, brought D-Day's announcement and crushing confirmation of American power. The invasion force stretched beyond imagination. Thousands of ships filled the English Channel. Aircraft darkened the skies in formation after formation. Hundreds of thousands of troops stormed the beaches of Normandy. The organizational capability represented by Operation Overlord exceeded German comprehension entirely. Newsreels shown to prisoners within days of the invasion revealed the vast armada in full detail. Artificial harbors were towed across the channel. Supply systems sustained operations of unprecedented scale. Prisoners realized their homeland faced not merely military defeat, but complete industrial overwhelming. The resources committed to this single operation exceeded Germany's entire remaining military capacity. Spring 1945 brought the war's end in Europe, and the most devastating revelation of all. American forces liberated Nazi concentration camps across Germany and Poland. Footage of these discoveries was shown to German prisoners without delay. Many initially refused to believe the images they witnessed. Claims of Allied propaganda filled the barracks. But testimony from American soldiers could not be dismissed. International observers confirmed every detail. Eventually, letters from Germany itself verified the horrific reality. This moral revelation completed the psychological transformation that had been building for 2 years. Germany had not only lost militarily and industrially, the entire Nazi project stood exposed as fundamentally criminal. Statistics of the German POW experience in America revealed both the program's vast scale and its remarkable success. From 1943 to 1946, America held 371,683 German prisoners in camps distributed across 46 states. Escape attempts numbered only 2,222 throughout the entire period. The rate fell below 1% of the total prison population. While one prisoner, Georg Gertner, escaped from Camp Deming, New Mexico, on September 21, 1945, and remained at large for 40 years until voluntarily surrendering in 1985, the overall recapture rate exceeded 99%. No American civilians were harmed by escaped prisoners during the entire war period. The safety record was perfect. Prisoners contributed significantly to the American war effort through their labor programs. Though exact figures remain disputed in historical records, documented evidence confirms specific details. Prisoners earned 80 cents per day for their work. Businesses paid the government 45 cents per hour for each prisoner laborer. In 1944 alone, the government received $22 million from prison wages. Estimated savings from using prisoners in military installations reached $80 million that same year. The secret re-education program operated by American military intelligence carefully documented psychological transformation occurring among prisoners. The Special Projects Division, established under the Provost Marshal General's office, implemented sophisticated ideological reorientation programs. However, historical assessments of effectiveness remain mixed among researchers. While 25,000 prisoners completed democracy courses through the Rapid Post-VE Day program, multiple sources confirm that the program failed to change views of the vast majority during the war itself. The program's approach evolved significantly over time. Initially, efforts focused on exposing prisoners to American media and educational materials. Later phases incorporated structured coursework on democratic governance. Free market economics received detailed attention. Constitutional law was taught systematically. Selected anti-Nazi prisoners received training as instructors and discussion leaders. This peer-to-peer education model proved more effective than direct American instruction. German prisoners teaching German prisoners about democracy achieved better results. Medical treatment provided to prisoners demonstrated American resources and humanitarian values simultaneously. German doctors working in camp hospitals learned techniques unavailable in their homeland. Equipment exceeded anything they had used previously. Mental health treatment, virtually unknown in the Wehrmacht, was provided to traumatized soldiers. Suicide attempts received counseling rather than punishment. This humanity toward active enemies revealed strength through compassion rather than brutality. Medical facilities in camps like Camp Shelby, Mississippi, and Camp Carson, Colorado, included fully equipped hospitals that rivaled civilian institutions. Surgical suites gleamed with modern instruments. X-ray departments operated continuously. Laboratory facilities provided diagnostic services. German medical personnel worked alongside American staff members. They gained experience with advanced treatments and cutting-edge procedures. Penicillin, still experimental and scarce in Germany, was used routinely in American POW camps. Prisoners received comprehensive dental care without charge. Eyeglasses were provided to those who needed them. Prosthetic devices were manufactured for amputees. These services exceeded what many had accessed as civilians in Germany before the war. Religious life in the camps challenged Nazi anti-religious ideology directly. Chaplains conducted services in German for prisoner congregations. Local churches donated religious materials regularly. Occasionally, church choirs performed concerts for prisoners. This spiritual dimension of American life, systematically suppressed in Nazi Germany, offered prisoners alternative frameworks for understanding human dignity and social organization. Catholic and Protestant services were held regularly throughout the camp system. Some camps reported attendance rates exceeding 60% of the prisoner population. Jewish refugees who had fled Nazi Germany sometimes served as translators and cultural intermediaries. Their presence forced prisoners to confront the human faces of those their ideology had systematically demonized. Transportation infrastructure observed during camp transfers and work details demonstrated integration on a continental scale. Railway networks moved vast quantities of materials efficiently across thousands of miles. Highway systems connected the entire nation seamlessly. Pipeline networks distributed petroleum products from refineries to consumers. This infrastructure, built through democratic governance rather than authoritarian command, supported both military efforts and civilian prosperity simultaneously. Prisoners working on railroad maintenance witnessed the sophistication of American logistics firsthand. Automatic switching systems controlled traffic flow. Centralized traffic control coordinated movements across entire regions. Maintenance procedures kept the vast network operating at peak efficiency continuously. Housing conditions for American workers, glimpsed during labor details, exceeded what German professionals enjoyed in their homeland. Workers owned homes equipped with electricity, running water, and modern appliances. Their children attended free public schools without charge. Medical care was available through employer-provided insurance programs. This broad prosperity challenged Nazi propaganda about American capitalism exploiting workers systematically. Consumer culture, visible through camp experiences and work details, revealed production designed for comfort rather than mere survival. Automobiles were mass-produced for ordinary citizens. Radios brought entertainment into every home. Refrigerators preserved food in private kitchens. This consumer abundance was achieved while simultaneously fighting a global war. The productive capacity demonstrated exceeded German comprehension entirely. Racial integration in military units and defense plants, while limited by 1940s standards, still exceeded Nazi racial ideology's rigid segregation policies. Prisoners observed African American soldiers and workers operating complex machinery successfully. Positions of genuine responsibility were held by minorities. While American racial problems were evident and serious, the contrast with Nazi racial doctrine was stark and undeniable. Some prisoners recorded surprise at seeing African American sergeants commanding white troops in routine military operations. Skilled black workers trained white employees in factory settings. These scenes were impossible under Nazi racial laws. The velocity of American innovation, observed through regular equipment updates and procedure changes, impressed technically minded prisoners consistently. New machines regularly replaced functional equipment that still worked perfectly. Production methods continuously improved without interruption. This constant advancement contrasted sharply with German tendency to perfect existing systems rather than innovate continuously. Quality control methods observed in American facilities revolutionized German industrial thinking permanently. Statistical sampling caught problems before they developed. Tolerance specifications prevented defects systematically. Systematic inspection procedures maintained standards automatically. German craftsmanship had traditionally relied on individual skill and experience. American systematization achieved higher quality through scientific process control methods. The role of women in American war production challenged German gender concepts fundamentally. Women operated heavy machinery successfully. Production lines were supervised by female managers. Technical work was performed competently by women. While Rosie the Riveter represented partly propaganda, the reality of female industrial participation exceeded anything Germany attempted despite desperate labor shortages. Prisoners observed women welding ship hulls with professional skill. Cranes were operated by female workers. Production lines were managed by women supervisors. These roles were deemed impossible for women to perform effectively under Nazi ideology. Credit systems observed in American society demonstrated financial sophistication unknown in Germany. Farmers borrowed money for equipment that increased productivity measurably. Workers purchased homes with mortgage financing. This productive use of credit, rather than mere consumption, enabled economic growth that Germany's conservative financial system couldn't match. Prisoners learned about installment buying plans that made expensive goods accessible to ordinary workers. Consumer credit systems supported economic expansion. Banks played active roles in facilitating economic growth through lending. These concepts were largely foreign to German economic thinking of the era. Research and development efforts, glimpsed through university programs and industrial laboratories, showed systematic innovation investment. American companies invested heavily in future technologies while meeting current production demands simultaneously. This forward-looking approach contrasted sharply with German focus on immediate military needs exclusively. Prisoners with technical backgrounds were particularly impressed by American investment in basic research programs. Long-term technological superiority required sustained support for fundamental science. This understanding shaped their post-war perspectives significantly. Management techniques observed in American organizations emphasized delegation and individual initiative consistently. Lower-level managers made important decisions that in Germany required senior approval automatically. This distributed decision-making increased operational efficiency dramatically. Leadership development occurred throughout organizations systematically. The concept of management by objective rather than detailed micromanagement supervision was revolutionary to prisoners accustomed to rigid hierarchical control systems. Labor relations in American facilities demonstrated productivity achieved through genuine cooperation. While unions faced restrictions during wartime, collective bargaining's basic framework remained intact. Workers participated actively in productivity improvement programs. Benefits were shared when goals were achieved. This stakeholder approach exceeded German authoritarian management's effectiveness consistently. Prisoners observed suggestion boxes that encouraged worker input. Productivity bonuses rewarded exceptional performance. Worker committees addressed operational concerns. These mechanisms for employee participation were unthinkable in Nazi Germany's command economy. Safety practices in American facilities prioritized worker protection above production quotas. Machine guards were standard equipment. Ventilation systems maintained air quality. Protective equipment was provided routinely. This investment in worker safety, even extending to prisoner labor, demonstrated genuine valuing of human capital beyond mere exploitation. The contrast with German industrial practices was stark and undeniable. Worker safety was often sacrificed for production quotas in German facilities. Standardization across American industry enabled mass production efficiency that impressed technically trained prisoners. Screws, bolts, and electrical components were interchangeable between manufacturers. German industry's lack of standardization hindered production integration significantly. Maintenance efficiency suffered from incompatible parts and systems. Supply chain management observed in American operations demonstrated logistical sophistication beyond German capabilities. Raw materials flowed continuously to production facilities without interruption. Finished goods moved efficiently from manufacturers to end users. This orchestrated movement of materials, managed through democratic cooperation rather than authoritarian command, sustained unprecedented production levels consistently. Professional development opportunities available to American workers through night schools and correspondence courses demonstrated commitment to human capital development. Workers improved skills while remaining employed full-time. Career advancement occurred through education and merit. This system challenged German class-based limitations on social mobility. Environmental abundance surrounding camps demonstrated natural resources America could exploit without constraint. Forests stretched beyond horizons. Mineral deposits seemed inexhaustible. Agricultural land extended across entire states. This resource base, combined with industrial capability, made American victory mathematically inevitable. Prisoners from resource-poor Germany were astounded by casual exploitation of seemingly limitless natural wealth. Communication systems, including telephone networks and radio broadcasting, demonstrated information infrastructure that enabled unprecedented coordination. Americans communicated across vast distances routinely and effortlessly. Connectivity allowed coordination that Germany's limited systems couldn't achieve under any circumstances. Prisoners amazed themselves by witnessing ordinary Americans making long-distance telephone calls casually. Radio brought instant news from around the world continuously. Mail service delivered letters across the continent within days. Public health measures observed in camps and surrounding communities showed systematic approaches to population wellness. Vaccination programs prevented disease outbreaks. Sanitation systems maintained hygiene standards. Health education protected public welfare. Germany's ideologically driven health policies had subordinated medical wellness to racial doctrine consistently. The American approach focused on practical disease prevention and health promotion, regardless of ideological considerations. Superior health outcomes were achieved through scientific methods. Entertainment industries, visible through films and radio programming, demonstrated cultural production continuing during wartime without interruption. Hollywood produced morale-boosting entertainment, while factories simultaneously produced weapons of war. This dual capacity for creation and destruction exceeded German capabilities entirely. Prisoners watched American films that showed self-criticism and acknowledged social problems openly. The Grapes of Wrath proved particularly impactful. They were amazed that a nation at war would permit such frank discussion of its own social failings. Voluntary organizations, observed through prisoner interactions with religious and civic groups, demonstrated civil society's inherent strength. Americans organized themselves for mutual benefit without state compulsion. Associational life, systematically destroyed in Nazi Germany, sustained democratic culture effectively. The YMCA, Red Cross, church groups, and civic clubs all contributed to prisoner welfare programs. This demonstrated vibrant civil society operating independently of government control. Production statistics that prisoners gradually learned through various sources painted a comprehensive picture of overwhelming industrial superiority that made German defeat not just likely, but absolutely inevitable from the moment America entered the war. America's wartime production reached levels that defied comprehension. The numbers tell an almost unbelievable story. 300,000 aircraft rolled off American assembly lines during the war years. 86,000 tanks rumbled from factory floors. 2.6 million trucks emerged from manufacturing plants. Vast quantities of every military necessity poured from American facilities. All this happened while civilian consumption remained above peacetime levels. The naval statistics were even more staggering. America launched more ships in 1943 alone than Japan produced during the entire conflict. Shipyards worked at breakneck speed. Welding sparks flew day and night. Steel plates clanged into position. Workers moved with mechanical precision. By autumn 1943, all Allied shipping lost since 1939 had been completely replaced. These figures weren't manufactured for propaganda purposes. Prisoners could see the truth with their own eyes. Those assigned to port duties counted vessels streaming through harbors. Ship after ship arrived loaded with supplies. Cargo holds emptied and filled again. The maritime traffic never stopped flowing. Prisoners working near aircraft manufacturing facilities watched bombers emerge from production lines. Wings attached to fuselages, engines mounted with precision, paint applied in perfect coats. Test flights occurred overhead daily. The sky filled with new aircraft bearing American markings. Those stationed in agricultural regions witnessed harvests beyond imagination. Wheat fields stretched to horizons. Corn grew in perfect rows. Mechanical harvesters worked vast expanses. Grain silos filled to overflowing. This abundance could feed entire nations. The evidence surrounded them everywhere they looked. No amount of skepticism could explain away what prisoners observed directly. The scale overwhelmed every preconception. The efficiency challenged every assumption. The abundance contradicted every piece of Nazi propaganda they had absorbed. Individual transformations among captured soldiers proved remarkable to witness. Officers who had pledged personal loyalty to Hitler began discussing democratic reconstruction plans. Men who had embraced Nazi ideology completely fell into stunned silence. American industrial capacity confronted them with undeniable reality. Production statistics they initially dismissed as enemy propaganda proved conservative estimates. Actual American output exceeded even the most optimistic Allied claims. Several examples illustrate these dramatic personal transformations, though specific claims about individuals require careful historical verification. Walter Holstein entered American captivity in June 1944. His capture occurred during fierce fighting at the Battle of Cherbourg. Camp Como in Mississippi became his new home. There he organized an educational program for fellow prisoners. He taught legal principles to men hungry for knowledge. His participation in the American re-education program led to advanced studies. Administrative training at Fort Getty in Rhode Island followed. After returning to Germany, Holstein rose to remarkable prominence. He became the first president of the Commission of the European Economic Community. His tenure lasted from 1958 to 1967. He helped establish foundations for what would become the European Union. His wartime captivity had planted seeds for continental cooperation. However, claims about Hans Kroll require correction. Kroll was never imprisoned in America as alleged. His wartime service took him to diplomatic posts in Turkey and Spain. He never experienced American captivity firsthand. After the war, he became West German ambassador to the Soviet Union. His service there lasted from 1958 to 1962. His wartime experience differed completely from the prisoner narrative. The Special Projects Division's re-education program remains controversial among historians. Lieutenant Colonel Edward Davison established the program in late 1943. Complete secrecy surrounded its initial operations. The goal was breathtakingly ambitious: transform Nazi soldiers into democratic citizens, prepare them to rebuild Germany after Allied victory. Program administrators divided prisoners into three distinct categories. Anti-Nazi prisoners comprised roughly 10%. Non-political prisoners made up 75 to 80%. Committed Nazis represented 10 to 15% of captives. Strategy focused primarily on the middle group. Anti-Nazi prisoners served as instructors and discussion leaders. Hardcore Nazis were isolated to prevent their corrupting influence. Sophisticated psychological techniques formed the program's foundation. Exposure to American media demonstrated democratic values in action. Literature showed freedom of thought and expression. Structured courses covered American history and governmental systems. Discussion groups led by anti-Nazi prisoners encouraged open debate. Vocational training emphasized civilian skills over military applications. Information about Nazi atrocities was introduced gradually and carefully. Historians continue debating the program's effectiveness. 25,000 prisoners completed formal democracy courses. Contemporary assessments suggested limited immediate impact. A 1946 report from the Provost Marshal General's Office acknowledged disappointing results. The program failed to achieve fundamental changes in most prisoners' thinking. However, longer-term impacts may have proven more significant. Many former prisoners later occupied important positions in West German reconstruction. They implemented American-inspired methods throughout rebuilding efforts. They understood crucial concepts from first-hand experience. Prosperity came through production rather than conquest. Democracy generated wealth more effectively than authoritarianism. Treating workers as stakeholders produced superior results compared to coercion. The Marshall Plan wasn't announced until 1947, but groundwork for German-American cooperation was laid through prisoner experiences. Former captives who had witnessed American methods became advocates for adoption during Reconstruction. They served as bridges between American expertise and German implementation. Technical assistance programs accompanying the Marshall Plan built upon relationships developed during captivity years. Former prisoners who had experienced American industrial methods became interpreters for American advisors. They translated more than language between cultures. They conveyed concepts and approaches that bridged gaps in understanding. Agricultural transformation advocated by former prisoners proved particularly significant. German farming had remained largely traditional for centuries. Small plots dominated the landscape. Animal power provided most energy. Mechanization remained limited and inefficient. Prisoners who worked on American farms returned home advocating radical changes. Land consolidation could increase efficiency dramatically. Mechanization could multiply productivity beyond imagination. Scientific farming methods could revolutionize yields. They had witnessed American farmers cultivating hundreds of acres with machinery. Scientific breeding programs doubled livestock productivity. Advanced fertilization techniques enhanced soil fertility. Rural electrification transformed farm operations completely. These advocates faced significant resistance from traditional German farming communities. Food shortages in the immediate post-war period created opportunities for reform. Former prisoners who could explain American methods from personal experience became valuable advisors. Agricultural reconstruction programs desperately needed their expertise. The transformation of German agriculture in the 1950s owed much to knowledge gained in American captivity. traditional farming gave way to modern mechanized methods. Industrial techniques observed by prisoners found direct application in German reconstruction. Quality control procedures seen in American factories were implemented in rebuilt German industries. Production line organization replaced traditional craft methods. Worker safety practices observed overseas were adopted domestically. The concept of continuous improvement witnessed in American plants revolutionized German thinking. American facilities constantly upgraded equipment and procedures. This replaced the German tradition of perfecting existing systems indefinitely. Former prisoners who had observed American management techniques introduced revolutionary concepts. Management by objective replaced authoritarian command structures. Distributed decision-making empowered workers at all levels. Worker participation in productivity improvements became standard practice. These ideas were revolutionary in traditional German industrial culture. They gradually took hold during the Reconstruction period. The German economic miracle of the 1950s incorporated many American methods first observed by prisoners of war. Psychological transformation extended far beyond mere observation of material abundance. Prisoners experienced fundamental shifts in their entire worldview. Nazi ideology had taught them that democracy meant chaos and confusion. They expected racial mixing to produce weakness and decline. Capitalism was supposed to mean exploitation of workers by owners. Instead, they witnessed order arising naturally from freedom. Strength emerged from diversity rather than uniformity. Market economics produced prosperity for broad segments of society. This cognitive dissonance created what psychologists would later identify as ideological collapse syndrome. Symptoms included complete withdrawal from political discussions. Previously held beliefs were rejected entirely. Eagerness to learn about alternative systems replaced closed-minded certainty. Camp psychologists documented these changes carefully. Even prisoners who maintained German patriotism abandoned Nazi ideology when confronted with contradictory evidence. The transformation wasn't universal or immediate across all prisoners. Many remained deeply skeptical of what they observed. They attributed American prosperity to unique geographic advantages. Some claimed wartime conditions created temporary abundance. Others maintained that German methods properly applied remained fundamentally superior. However, even the most skeptical prisoners couldn't deny the evidence before their eyes. America's productive capacity far exceeded anything Nazi Germany had achieved. No rational analysis could explain away this overwhelming superiority. Beyond formal re-education programs, informal cultural exchange played crucial roles in transformation. Prisoners working on farms often shared meals with American families. Kitchen tables became classrooms for cultural understanding. Home-cooked food created bonds between former enemies. Simple kindness challenged Nazi propaganda more effectively than any formal program. Those employed in factories worked directly alongside American civilians. They observed work habits and attitudes firsthand. They witnessed cooperation between different ethnic groups. They saw democracy functioning at the most basic levels. These human connections proved more powerful than any ideological argument. Many prisoners maintained correspondence with American families for decades after returning home. Relationships that began with simple kindness shown to enemy prisoners evolved into lasting friendships. These bonds helped bridge the divide between former enemies permanently. Reunions of former prisoners and their American hosts in subsequent decades testified to profound human connections formed during captivity. The religious dimension of the prisoner experience deserves special attention and analysis. Nazi ideology had systematically subordinated traditional Christian ethics to racial doctrine and state power. Churches became tools of government propaganda. Faith was twisted to serve political purposes. Religious leaders were silenced or corrupted. In American camps, prisoners encountered Christianity practiced without state control or ideological distortion. Local churches ministered to prisoners voluntarily. They demonstrated faith expressed through voluntary association rather than government compulsion. Charitable action flowed from genuine conviction rather than political necessity. This religious revival among prisoners was remarkably significant. Chapel attendance in camps often exceeded levels in German military units. It surpassed participation in civilian communities back home. Prisoners found in traditional Christian ethics an alternative to Nazi ideology. Faith provided a framework for understanding their experience and planning for the future. The post-war Christian democratic movement in Germany drew substantial support from former prisoners. Many had rediscovered religious faith in American camps. This spiritual revival influenced political development throughout Reconstruction. Educational programs in camps extended far beyond vocational training or political re-education. For many prisoners, especially those from working-class backgrounds with limited formal schooling, camps provided unprecedented educational opportunities. They learned English through daily conversation and formal classes. American literature opened new intellectual horizons. Correspondence courses from American universities were available to motivated students. Intellectual discussions impossible under Nazi censorship flourished in camp settings. This intellectual liberation proved particularly important for younger prisoners. Their education had been shaped entirely by Nazi ideology from childhood. Exposure to alternative ideas fundamentally changed their approach to knowledge and authority. Critical thinking replaced rote acceptance of propaganda. Open debate encouraged independent thought. Many former prisoners pursued higher education after repatriation. They used skills and interests developed during American captivity to build new careers. Exposure to American capitalism challenged every aspect of Nazi economic doctrine. Prisoners had been taught that capitalism meant inevitable exploitation. Workers were supposed to suffer under corporate oppression. Economic democracy was allegedly impossible under market systems. Instead, they witnessed workers owning automobiles and homes. Union representatives negotiated directly with management. Broad prosperity was achieved through market economics rather than state control. This economic education proved particularly important for Germany's post-war development. Former prisoners understood market mechanisms from personal observation rather than theoretical study. They grasped how consumer credit functioned in practice. Industrial relations made sense through direct experience. They had seen how productive investment differed from mere accumulation of wealth. Credit could enable economic growth rather than just financing consumption. Worker prosperity enhanced rather than threatened overall economic development. These insights proved invaluable during Reconstruction efforts. The prisoner experience created an entire generation of Germans with first-hand knowledge of American society. Unlike negative stereotypes promoted by Nazi propaganda, these impressions were based on years of direct contact. They differed from superficial observations of tourists or brief diplomatic encounters. These men had lived and worked in America extensively. They understood American strengths and weaknesses from daily experience. Capabilities and limitations were observed directly rather than assumed theoretically. This knowledge proved invaluable during the emerging Cold War period. Former prisoners who understood American power and intentions could counter Soviet propaganda effectively. They knew from personal experience that American strength came from production rather than conquest. Freedom generated power more effectively than oppression. Their testimony helped anchor West Germany firmly within the Atlantic Alliance. While some specific statistics about the prisoner program cannot be independently verified, documented figures remain genuinely impressive. 371,683 German prisoners were held in America at peak capacity. 425,871 total Axis prisoners included Italians and Japanese, as well as Germans. 46 states hosted prisoner camps. Only Nevada, North Dakota, and Vermont lacked facilities. 175 main camps operated with over 325 branch camps supporting them. 2,222 escape attempts occurred. This represented less than 1% of all prisoners. 25,000 prisoners completed formal democracy courses successfully. 135 camp newspapers were published regularly. Construction of new camps was typically completed within 90 days of groundbreaking. These figures represent one of the largest prisoner operations in military history. The program was executed while America simultaneously fought a global war on multiple fronts. The scale of operations itself demonstrated American organizational capacity to friend and foe alike. Prisoner experiences varied significantly, depending on regional assignments. Those in the agricultural Midwest witnessed mechanized farming and agricultural abundance beyond European imagination. Prisoners in the industrial Northeast observed manufacturing might and urban prosperity. Enormous factories operated around the clock. Workers lived in comfortable homes. Consumer goods filled store shelves. Prisoners assigned to the South encountered racial segregation that partially confirmed Nazi propaganda about American society. However, they simultaneously saw African Americans in positions completely unthinkable under Nazi racial laws. Black supervisors directed white workers. African American professionals practiced medicine and law. Military units included integrated elements. Those stationed in the western states experienced the vastness of American resources firsthand. Natural wealth seemed unlimited. Frontier development displayed American dynamism clearly. New towns appeared seemingly overnight. Infrastructure expanded constantly westward. These regional variations provided prisoners with comprehensive pictures of American society. They couldn't dismiss prosperity as limited to certain areas or specific industries. From Maine to California, from Michigan to Texas, they witnessed abundance and industrial capacity exceeding their homeland's capabilities. Professional German military officers experienced particular cognitive dissonance during captivity. They had been trained to believe absolutely in German military superiority. The power of will was supposed to triumph over mere material advantages. Quality was assumed to be more important than quantity in warfare. In America, they discovered that quantity possessed a quality entirely its own. Material abundance enabled tactical flexibility impossible with limited resources. Democratic armies could match authoritarian forces in discipline and battlefield effectiveness. Professional competence thrived under democratic oversight rather than being hindered by it. These professional soldiers studied American military organization with intense interest. Logistics systems impressed them with their efficiency and scope. Doctrine combined flexibility with effectiveness. They observed how civilian expertise was integrated seamlessly into military planning. Industrial capacity translated directly into military power on global scales. Democratic oversight enhanced rather than hindered military effectiveness through informed decision-making. This knowledge significantly influenced development of the Bundeswehr. West Germany's post-war military adopted many American organizational concepts and training methods. Technical knowledge gained by prisoners extended beyond specific techniques to encompass entire approaches to innovation. They observed how Americans constantly sought improvement in every process. New technologies were rapidly adopted rather than resisted. Innovation was rewarded systematically rather than suppressed by bureaucracy. This innovation culture contrasted sharply with German emphasis on perfecting existing systems indefinitely. Prisoners with technical backgrounds paid particular attention to American production methods. Quality control systems impressed them with their systematic approach. Statistical methods replaced intuitive judgment. Maintenance procedures emphasized prevention rather than reaction to failures. They documented assembly line techniques in careful detail. Statistical quality control methods were studied and memorized. Preventive maintenance schedules were analyzed for efficiency gains. This technical knowledge was brought back to Germany after repatriation. It significantly influenced industrial reconstruction efforts throughout the 1950s. German industry regained international competitiveness partly through methods learned in American captivity. The transformation of German prisoners carried generational consequences far beyond individual experiences. These men returned to Germany not merely as individuals but as fathers, teachers, and community leaders. They raised children with fundamentally different values than those promoted by Nazi ideology. They taught healthy skepticism toward all forms of propaganda. Appreciation for democratic processes was instilled from early childhood. Respect for human dignity regardless of race or nationality became family values. Children grew up hearing stories of American abundance and kindness, rather than Nazi propaganda about American weakness and moral decadence. The children of former prisoners absorbed positive attitudes toward America and democratic values. This generational transmission of experience helped create the strong, pro-American sentiment that characterized West Germany throughout the Cold War period. The Americanization of German culture in the 1950s and 1960s built upon solid foundations laid by prisoner experiences. Jazz music gained popularity partly through prisoner advocacy. American movies found receptive audiences. Consumer culture was embraced rather than resisted. Reunions of former prisoners provide powerful testimony to transformations achieved through American captivity. The 1985 reunion held in Austin, Texas, brought together over 500 former prisoners of war. The gathering demonstrated lasting impact of their wartime experiences in America. These men returned not as former enemies seeking reconciliation, but as genuine friends bringing their families. They wanted to show their children and grandchildren where their personal transformations had begun decades earlier. Tours of former campsites became pilgrimages of gratitude rather than bitter remembrance. At these emotional reunions, former prisoners testified publicly about the profound impact of their captivity experience. They spoke movingly of arriving as committed Nazi soldiers and departing as democratic citizens. American kindness had shown them alternatives to hatred and violence that they never knew existed. They expressed genuine gratitude for treatment that exceeded what their own government had ever provided them. Education received in camps had prepared them for peaceful reconstruction rather than continued military conflict. Many credited their captivity with saving their lives spiritually as well as physically. Historians continue debating the effectiveness and long-term impact of the German prisoner experience in America. Some scholarly arguments emphasize that formal re-education programs had limited immediate effects on participant attitudes. Most prisoners remained focused on personal survival and eventual return home rather than ideological transformation during captivity. Other historians contend that broader long-term impacts were genuinely profound in scope. The experience created an entire generation of Germans naturally receptive to democratic values and American alliance. This perspective emphasizes cultural rather than political transformation. Current evidence suggests both scholarly perspectives contain important elements of truth. Formal re-education programs indeed produced limited immediate impact on committed Nazis. A political prisoners focused primarily on survival showed little interest in ideological discussions during captivity. However, the broader experience of American society created lasting impressions that significantly influenced post-war German development. Exposure to industrial abundance and democratic prosperity generated powerful memories that shaped post-war attitudes and policies. Recent scholarship has emphasized unintended consequences of the prisoner program over formal objectives. While American authorities focused energy on structured re-education efforts, the most powerful influences came from informal observations and daily experiences. Transformation occurred more effectively through exposure to reality than through propaganda presentations. The reality of American productive capacity spoke louder than any lecture. Democratic functionality impressed more than theoretical discussions. Human decency toward enemies conveyed messages beyond any formal curriculum. The German prisoner experience in America offers valuable lessons for contemporary conflict resolution and reconstruction efforts. It demonstrates clearly that ideological transformation occurs more effectively through practical example than through theoretical exhortation. Treating enemies with fundamental dignity can convert them into reliable allies over time. Exposure to genuine prosperity and functional freedom can undermine authoritarian ideology more effectively than military defeat alone ever accomplishes. The program's success came not from sophisticated psychological manipulation techniques, but from simple exposure to American society functioning normally. The most powerful argument against Nazi ideology wasn't propaganda, but observable prosperity. Reality proved more convincing than rhetoric in changing fundamental beliefs. This lesson remains highly relevant for contemporary ideological conflicts worldwide. Democratic society's greatest weapon against authoritarianism is their own demonstrable success in creating prosperity while maintaining human dignity. The German prisoner experience in America represents one of history's most successful examples of transformation achieved through exposure to reality rather than coercion. Without violence or traditional propaganda techniques, American industrial might and democratic values converted defeated enemies into future allies. Prisoners arrived believing firmly in German cultural superiority and American weakness. They departed understanding that American industrial democracy represented a more advanced civilization. This system had defeated not merely German armies, but the entire ideological foundation supporting Nazism. The 371,683 German prisoners who passed through American camps between 1943 and 1946 witnessed the arsenal of democracy operating at absolute peak efficiency. They observed farmers producing food sufficient for global consumption. Workers built tools of victory in quantities exceeding imagination. Citizens treated enemies with dignity that exceeded treatment of their own soldiers by Nazi authorities. They learned through direct observation that America's true weapon wasn't bombs or tanks, but inexhaustible capacity for creation and production. This lesson resonated far beyond military applications into civilian reconstruction efforts. Transformation was neither universal nor immediate among all prisoners of war. Some individuals remained skeptical of what they observed throughout captivity. Others clung desperately to remnants of Nazi ideology despite contradictory evidence. Many focused simply on personal survival and eventual return rather than ideological questions. However, cumulative impact across the entire prisoner population was undeniably significant. An entire generation of Germans returned home carrying first-hand knowledge of American power and prosperity. They understood democratic functionality and market economics from personal observation. Religious freedom and human dignity had been experienced rather than merely discussed theoretically. These men became unwitting ambassadors of democratic values upon repatriation. They carried back to their devastated homeland seeds of transformation that would bloom into one of history's most successful national reconstructions. They implemented American agricultural methods throughout German farming regions. Industrial techniques observed overseas were adapted to German manufacturing. Management practices learned in captivity influenced corporate development. Democratic principles were advocated in political discussions. Former prisoners advocated consistently for market economics over state control. Atlantic Alliance received support from those who understood American intentions through personal contact. They raised children with values shaped by American experiences rather than Nazi ideology. The economic miracle that transformed West Germany throughout the 1950s drew heavily upon knowledge gained in American prison camps. Former prisoners who had witnessed American methods firsthand became architects of German reconstruction efforts. They understood from experience that prosperity originated from production rather than conquest. Democracy could generate wealth more effectively than authoritarian systems ever managed. Treating workers as genuine stakeholders produced superior results compared to coercive management methods. The Atlantic Alliance that anchored Western security throughout Cold War decades built upon understanding developed in American prison camps. Former prisoners who had experienced American power and generosity became effective advocates for German-American partnership. They could testify from personal experience that American strength served defensive rather than aggressive purposes. American prosperity was designed to benefit allies rather than exploit them economically. This testimony proved crucial in anchoring West Germany within Western Alliance systems. The story of German prisoners in America ultimately demonstrates the superior power of truth over propaganda. Reality proved more convincing than ideology in changing fundamental beliefs. Example worked more effectively than exhortation in achieving lasting transformation. These men were converted not through clever arguments, but by overwhelming evidence of American success. Every electric light bulb argued against Nazi ideology more effectively than any propaganda could achieve. Every automobile demonstrated American industrial capacity. Every full meal contradicted claims about American weakness and decline. German prisoners had expected to find a weak, divided nation teetering on the verge of internal collapse. Instead, they discovered an industrial colossus of seemingly unlimited power, combined with surprising humanity in treatment of enemies. They witnessed agricultural abundance sufficient to feed entire nations during wartime. Industrial capacity could simultaneously arm global allies while maintaining civilian prosperity. Democratic institutions functioned effectively under extreme wartime stress. They experienced genuine kindness from enemies that their own authoritarian government had never demonstrated toward them. Treatment as human beings rather than expendable resources impressed them profoundly. In their personal transformation lay seeds of Europe's post-war redemption and final defeat of Nazi ideology. They returned to Germany not as defeated enemies nursing grievances, but as witnesses to what free societies could achieve when properly organized. Their children grew up in democratic Germany, allied closely with the United States. This partnership was built upon transformation that began when veterans of Rommel's Afrika Korps stepped off trains in Texas during June 1943 and discovered that everything they had believed about America was completely wrong. The legacy of German prisoner experiences in America extends beyond individual transformation or bilateral diplomatic relations. It demonstrates conclusively that democracy's most powerful weapon isn't military might, but simple, overwhelming evidence of free society's capacity to create abundance while maintaining human dignity. German soldiers who witnessed American industrial might weren't merely stunned by its scale and efficiency. They were fundamentally changed by prolonged exposure to its implications for human organization and social development. Their collective story stands as permanent testament to profound truth about ideological conflict. Sometimes the greatest victories are won not through destruction, but through demonstration of superior alternatives. Not through conquest, but through conversion of former enemies into allies. Not through hatred, but through humanity consistently applied even toward those who had shown no mercy. German prisoners were initially stunned by American industrial might beyond their comprehension. Ultimately, they were completely transformed by sustained exposure to its human implications. In that transformation lay solid foundation for a better world, built on recognition that free people working cooperatively could achieve more than authoritarian powers could ever imagine possible. The German prisoner experience in America was not merely a footnote to World War II, but a crucial chapter in the transformation of the entire 20th century. It proved conclusively that enemies could become allies through proper treatment. Warriors could become builders of peaceful societies. Witnesses to democracy's success could become its most effective advocates worldwide. In the end, transformation achieved not through force, but through consistent example, may have been America's greatest victory of the entire war. This victory continued paying dividends throughout the Cold War and beyond, as former enemies became reliable allies in defending freedom and human dignity against new threats.